All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into a story that, well, it's pretty much the bedrock of our entire digital world. We're talking about the global battle for a set of materials that have become every bit as strategic as oil ever was.
We hear so much about the incredible power of artificial intelligence, these massive data centers, all the complex code. But have you ever really stopped to think about what physically makes all of that possible? What are the actual physical ingredients?
Turns out, the answer isn't just in the cloud, it's in the ground. The entire digital world, the green energy transition, even our defense infrastructure, it all runs on a small group of really special and super strategic minerals.
Okay, so let's dive into this. The materials at the very heart of this story are called rare earth elements, or REEs for short. But here's the thing. That name, it's actually one of the biggest misnomers in science.
Here's the twist. They aren't actually rare at all. In fact, some of them are more common in the Earth's crust than stuff like copper or lead. So why the name? Well, their rarity comes from the fact that they are just incredibly difficult, super expensive, and honestly environmentally nasty to separate from their ores and from each other. And that complex, kind of dirty refining process, that is the absolute key to this entire story. Remember that.
So why on earth would we go to all that trouble? Because these elements have these incredible, unique properties that are just non-negotiable for modern tech. Think about it. They're what make the super strong magnets in EV motors and wind turbines spin. They're inside the hard drives that store all our data in the cloud. They're absolutely essential for the fiber optic cables that zip our internet across oceans, and for the advanced defense systems that protect entire nations. They are, and this isn't an exaggeration, they are literally everywhere in our high-tech lives.
So, what about the economic stakes? How big are we talking? Well, they're almost hard to wrap your head around. The industries that depend on these minerals, they have a combined market cap of over $82 trillion. Yeah, trillion with the T. This isn't some niche market, folks. This is the foundation of the modern global economy, period.
So in this incredibly high-stakes game, it turns out one country saw all of this coming decades ago, and they made a very strategic, very long-term play to basically control the entire board.
You have to go all the way back to 1992. The Chinese leader at the time, Deng Xiaoping, he laid out the vision crystal clear. He said, the Middle East has oil, China has rare earths. And that tells you everything. This was never just about economics, it was about securing the fundamental resources for future power, just like oil was for the 20th century.
And make no mistake, China's dominance today was no accident. It's the result of a very deliberate, whole-of-government strategy that's been in the works for decades. We're talking about everything from the top party leadership and government ministries, all the way down to state-owned companies and even the military. All of them coordinated with one single goal in mind: control the entire rare earth supply chain.
And wow, was that strategy effective? Ruthlessly so. Starting way back in the 80s, China used a playbook of state subsidies, super low labor costs, and, this is the big one, a willingness to just absorb the massive environmental damage from all that polluting refinement. What did that do? It let them sell rare earths so cheaply that competitors in the US, in Europe, everywhere else, they were simply driven out of business. They couldn't compete. But here's where it gets really smart. China's true genius wasn't just in digging stuff out of the ground. No, it was in mastering the one part of the process that everybody else desperately wanted to avoid.
Okay, look at this. This is the absolute crux of the issue. China controls something like 90% of the world's refining capacity. It's not about the mining, not really. It's about this midstream processing. This right here is the real choke point, and China has a near total monopoly.
So for decades, while the West was busy offshoring these dirty, complicated industries, China was busy mastering them. And this has created an absolutely incredible vulnerability. Today, even if the US or Australia mines rare earth ore, guess where it often has to be sent for final processing? Yep, to China. Without that one step, the raw material is basically useless.
So for a long time, this was just kind of a passive leverage. But lately, we've seen a major shift. We've seen China start to actively use this dominance as a powerful tool of statecraft.
And this timeline right here really shows you the playbook. It's a clear strategic escalation. It started pretty quietly in July 2023 with some new controls on a couple of key minerals, gallium and germanium. Then, a few months later, curbs on another one, antimony. By the end of 2024, those controls tightened into what was basically a functional ban on sending any of that stuff to the US. And then came the checkmate move, in early 2025, a ban on exporting the technology for processing these minerals. Think about that.
That's a move designed to stop other countries from even trying to build their own supply chains.
And listen, this is not some abstract theoretical problem. These actions have immediate, real-world consequences. In late 2024, the huge German industrial giant Henkel actually had to declare force majeure, which is basically legal speak for an act of God, preventing them from fulfilling their contracts. And this was all because of those new restrictions on antimony. It was already hitting major industries like automakers.
So the takeaway here is crystal clear. Control over these minerals, that sound so obscure, translates directly into massive geopolitical power. What China has built is extraordinary leverage over nearly every single advanced industry on the planet. We're talking cars, computers, and yeah, even our most critical defense systems.
Okay, so as you can imagine, this whole situation has been a gigantic wake-up call. The West is now scrambling to respond, essentially trying to rebuild an entire industrial capacity that it just gave away decades ago.
So what's the plan? Well, over in Europe, the big response is something called the Critical Raw Materials Act. And it's not just talk. It sets these really ambitious, concrete targets for 2030. They want to mine at least 10% of what they need, process a huge 40%, recycle about 25%, and this part is crucial, make sure that no more than 65% of any one material comes from a single country.
The U.S. is also on the move, with big legislation like the CHIPS Act. But really, the broader strategy is global. It's all about what they're calling resource diplomacy. You know, forging new alliances with resource-rich, friendly nations like Australia and Canada. And you'll hear this term friendshoring a lot. It's this idea of investing in a whole coalition of allies to build a brand new industrial ecosystem, completely outside of China's control. But here's an important point. The counter-strategy isn't just about trying to copy what China did. It's actually about doing it better. A huge part of this new vision is to rebuild these supply chains with the high environmental and labor standards that were, let's be honest, completely ignored in the rush to offshore everything decades ago. The goal is to create a more sustainable, more ethical alternative.
So, the lines have been drawn. The pieces are moving on the board. For decades, this whole battle was fought in quiet boardrooms and obscure commodity markets. Not anymore. Now it is completely out in the open. And the question that's going to define this century, it's no longer just about who can write the best code. It's about who controls the actual, physical building blocks that make our entire future possible.